So our last speaker is here, and we're ready to get started. I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight to what is our pilot product management event. I'm looking forward to an interesting dialogue this year as we talk about issues related to product management and portfolio management. My name is Don Morrill, and I'm the Executive Director of the New York Technology Council. I'd like to make a few quick opening announcements before we get started, starting by thanking our 2012 sponsors, EisnerAmper, Google, Power Space and Services, Ernst & Young, Verizon, TGP Associates, Information Builders, Frankfurt Kernet, IBM, and we have a new sponsor to announce this week, the accounting firm of J.H. Cohen. There's still a little bit of room up there on the logo soup slide, so if anybody's interested in sponsoring the organization this year, please feel free to talk to myself or any of the other NYTEC representatives that are here in the audience tonight. I'd like to give an extra special thanks to Verizon for hosting the event. They've been a great partner of ours over the years. They were one of our founding sponsors when we started the organization about 2.5 years ago. So just an extra special thanks to Verizon tonight for hosting this event. And so what I'd like to do now is turn the floor over to Nitin. Nitin is our new product management event series leader. As I said earlier, tonight is our inaugural event, and we're looking forward to an interesting dialogue and an interesting series of events this year. And I'll turn the floor over to you.
Thanks, Don.
Sure.
So since Don's thanked everyone already in terms of the audience for coming, I'll thank the panelists for working with me. It's been really good kind of getting to know them. And they get to do all of the work and I get all of the credit is kind of what I'm hoping for. We've got an interesting cross-section of panelists. So what I'll do first is just introduce them. And when I do, if you want to just raise your hand or stand up, whatever makes you kind of comfortable. So we'll do some introductions, and then they're going to talk about their products, their organization, perhaps what product management means to them, challenges, risks, opportunities, and mitigations. And then I've got some pre-prepared Q&A. We'll throw it open to the audience. So probably about half kind of structured and the other half pretty interactive. If there's something really pressing in terms of a point, or a question, a burning kind of desire you want to express, feel free to kind of raise your hand, kind of jump up and down. We'll try and kind of keep it under control, so if it gets too lively, I'll request you to hold it to the end of the forum. But again, start with some background and then get into a dialogue versus just a presentation. So I'll start with kind of Paul. It's Paul Shapiro. And there's actually a method to the madness. Sales Graphics is probably one of the oldest technology companies in New York. I couldn't believe it when I heard that it's been around for how many years?
60.
So very interesting DNA in terms of family involved, family owned as well, I think. But looking to kind of jump into the next generation of kind of social, interactive, creative, whatever that is. In terms of kind of Paul himself, he's done a bachelor's in theater, film, and TV from UCLA and an MBA from NYU. So a little West Coast perspective, a lot of East Coast experience, 15 years of experience in terms of media, creative, technology teams, and solutions. Anything you'd like to add to that, or?
No, I mean, we've learned the hard way how important product management can be. I'll talk about that.
Sounds great, thanks. Next, I'll kind of go to Michael. Michael Claiborne is the Director of Product Management at Wireless Generation. So we've got kind of a boutique, old school, kind of jumping into the new space, if you will, and then Wireless Generation, to the best of my understanding, is more of a mid-market firm within a really large enterprise. So the holding company is News Corp, but the culture is more of a mid-market, kind of an enterprise in terms of challenges, delivering products, opportunities. Michael's kind of background is more from a bachelor's and master's in computer science, and then an MBA from Columbia, consulting, I think air to web as well. I spent a few years in Atlanta, so we know a lot of people in common. So with that, anything else you want to add, Michael, in terms of context or the company?
We'll add more during the discussion.
Sounds great. So last but not the least, I'm doing it in order of appearance, I guess, is Sonpreet or Preeti, whatever you prefer. MyCityWay is different in DNA from kind of sales graphics and wireless generation, which is kind of VC funded, high growth, kind of poster childish, if you will, in terms of kind of getting applications out there, very agile, very hyper competitive, hopefully hyper growth as well, and hyper revenue and hyper market cap and everything else that comes with it. But then there's a lot of, I'm sure, heartburn as well as opportunity getting great product out the door. Sonpreet is a city dweller, global traveler. Their organization is fairly global as well. So I think her perspective will be more kind of from the mobile, fast growth, dynamic, social, product development, product management perspective. Anything else you want to add to that? Or sounds good. So with that, I think we'll get into the company, the individual presentations. So Don, if you want to pull them up. Or,
which one do you want to go first? You want Paul to go first?
Sure, we'll just go.
Great.
Good evening, everybody. As Nitin said, my name is Paul Shapiro from a company called Sales Graphics. And as he talked about just briefly, Sales Graphics is not a tech startup. We were founded in 1964. We focused on B2B presentations, and in 1964, that is exactly the presentations that we did. We started doing hand-lettered sales boards for the magazine and television industry, and that kept us in good stead for many years. We've always focused on the cutting-edge technology of the time. When the 35mm slide projector was invented, we were right on top of that when that came out. Video, CD-ROMs, the whole 9 yards. We've always tried to, use technology as a tool to deliver our services and serve our clients. And over the years, that served us well in terms of getting bigger and bigger and bigger clients. We started off in the media industry. We've since branched out into financial, cosmetics, luxury. And as our clients got bigger, they demanded more and more from our services. They demanded not just presentation software, but collaboration, management, networking, cloud-based software as a service. The list goes on. And so after 60 years, we kind of stood back and said, what did we just build? And realized that for the last 40 years, we had been building sort of ad hoc a enterprise technology solution system that started with desktop version 1.0 in 1999, and over the years we've added desktop versions. We have an iPad app, we have a collaborative online editing system, we have management across entire organizations. We now have global clients with users in all 6 continents. Well, not all 5 continents. I don't think we have anybody in Antarctica. And it just keeps growing and growing. And this is where we really realized, as I mentioned earlier, the need for product management the hard way. As a services company, what we always thought was that if we just stayed very close to our clients and close to our users, we would know what they want, we could build what they wanted. But as growth kept coming faster and faster, as our clients got bigger and bigger, we realized that we could no longer support that solely in an ad hoc manner. And we went through the process of moving from ad hoc to thinking it was a project management problem, and we simply worked on trying to build out project management systems. And it really was only recently that we realized that there's the importance of product management first, and that it's not enough just to know what our clients and our users want, but we have to be able to plan and build for that over the long haul if we're going to be able to continue to serve and stay ahead of the game with big clients and our big user base that we have. So as a team, we've always been service-based. We've always been very close to our clients. We have 20 employees. Half of it is on the service side, half of it is on the software development side. We just actually hired our first product manager to officially run that job. In the past, it had been managed by other people who were doing other things, and we figured, how hard could it be? And we've since realized how hard it actually is, and also how important it is. And I think that's one of the things that I think is exciting about the conversation that we're about to have. And that's it. Thanks.
Hi guys, my name is Mike Claiborne. So I'm a director of product management at Wireless Generation. I've been there about 2 years. I put together some very quick, not great slides just to kind of walk you through a little bit of background about the company before we get started. So we are
Left and right.
That's all right. There we go. Yep. So we're about a 12-year-old company. We were founded in 2000 by two Rhodes Scholars, and what they did is they had observed in the education space that the education space is one of the last industries that's really made use of technology to transform the way it does its business. You think about financial services, media, all of these other companies have been radically transformed in the way that they run their businesses, and education is really far behind. So these guys would go into classrooms and observe opportunities where teachers were working in a really manual way to assess students, to collect assessment data, to gain insights from the assessment data that they collected, and to act on that. So they have developed a series of products that have helped to automate that and enhance that and help teachers to work more efficiently and effectively. I like to think of us as like the largest tech company in New York that you've never heard of. We're about, when I joined 2 years ago, we were 400 people. We're now a little bit over 600. We're growing fairly rapidly. About 400 of those are in New York. Huge floors full of developers. But because we're in the ed tech space, we don't get quite as much press as Yelp or other companies. But we're here, and we as Nitin mentioned, we recently got acquired by News Corp about 14 months ago for a fairly large exit. So we are now owned by a larger corporation, but we're still very much operated and managed in an independent manner. And I included a couple of slides in here just to give you guys a sense of like what does it mean to be in the ed tech space for us. So we, like I mentioned, our technology enables teachers to work more effectively and efficiently. You're seeing here is a teacher who's doing an educational assessment with a student, and she's using our application on a mobile device to collect information as she's assessing the student that she can then upload to a server, use that information to do analysis and do things like pull down activities or lesson plans that are particular to that student and that student's need at that time, which is really like automating a lot of different steps that would have been done manually by a student before. So really this slide just kind of talks about it. So it's really just providing the same types of benefits you would get from automating business processes and bringing technology in the business environment where it wasn't before. And then just a quick slide to say we actually are a real company. We're in 49 states. Most of the big school districts are our customers. We have several state-level customers. So we have a fairly decent-sized customer base. We're beyond the startup stage, but we still like to think of ourselves as kind of like that Brooklyn hipster company. So we still have a lot of people come in sandals and t-shirts and jeans at 10 or 11 in the morning, and so still we're trying to keep that small Brooklyn startup feel, even though we're at 600 people now. And I think so. Since Paul mentioned one of the things we're struggling with, I'll just say one thing we're struggling with is trying to keep that young startup feel where we can go out and identify innovative opportunities and launch products fairly quickly at the same time while you're dealing with a 600-person size organization and all the legacy applications and infrastructure, and it just becomes much more complicated to coordinate, and so you find yourself doing a lot of things that aren't about the essence of product management, but more about just the day-to-day things that aren't adding value to a customer. And that's one thing we're struggling for. How do you get above the minutia of the day-to-day operations and get back focusing on those things that are really going to help you add value to the customer? So, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sonpreet Bhatia, and I'm one of the co-founders at MyCityWay, one of the 3 co-founders at MyCityWay. So we call it urban-tastic, metrolicious, and citterific. So unlike what Paul said, we are a startup. And basically, we are urban, metro, and city for a mobility platform for for smartphones. That's what we are. What does that mean, right? Oh,
It's
the left, right goes in the end.
because that's the short version, the one.
Oh, you have the short version.
Yeah.
Do you have the long version?
No, I think the short version is what's public, right? So.
Okay, I'll talk off my long version and then you guys can. I wish we had it up, but.
Would you?
So MyCityWay's unique platform really offers that one-stop shop that a city dweller would need to get around town, right from everything that's entertainment to civics. So starting from dining, nightlife, events, traffic cameras, live traffic cameras, traffic, all the way to city civic information is what we bring into this one mobility platform, if you will. We are in 70 cities so far, and we are multi-language, so we are a global company as well. So a little bit about I'll just talk about the snapshot. We're 3 co-founders in the company. We launched 2 years back, December 2009, and we've been funded by a bunch of investors. The first round was the seed round by the City of New York and a couple of more investors, and then the Series A was led by BMW iVentures. So we've raised $6 million so far. We have a good team size. In US, we are 15 people. In India, we're about 30 people. And then as we are a global company, we have people all around the globe, once in a while helping us with different things. As I said, market coverage, we are 70 cities, 40 in US, and 30 the rest of the world. We have surpassed 4 million activations. We're close to 5 million activations now, so it's really been all word of mouth so far. So it's kind of global, but we are reaching 5 million users soon. The growth rate really has been 21%, so we're proud of that. Our platforms are iPhone, iPad, and every smartphone that you can imagine, including Windows and Nokia and whatnot, coming out very soon. We have more than we're not just a mobility platform company, right? We're a big data company as well, because we take all these data sets, hundreds of data sets all around from all the place, and we bring it together, make some sense out of that, put our relevance layer on top of it, and then present it on this form factor that you see, a small mobile phone, right? So some of the global recognition we've won multiple awards. I'll go forward and see if you have that. This just talks about the new product, so.
Okay, I think we use the one that's public because the
That's
other
fine.
one was.
That's okay.
supposed
Yeah.
to be private.
So we've won many awards worldwide, and one being the NYC Big Apps, which was yesterday was the 3rd year of that. If you guys have heard about it, we won multiple awards there. We won the Intel Award, the Business Insider Award, NYC EDC, Cranes New York, name it, and we've got some good coverage from the press as well, and we also got invited to ring the NASDAQ closing bell a couple of years back. So this slide, which is not up here, talks about the 70 markets, but pretty much we're a global company. Let's skip this. Yeah, just wanted to talk a bit about the top 10 categories of our application that users really like, and really the top 10, but we offer more than 60 categories within our application, right? So everything that city has to offer, we showcase that on this mobile platform. So the top 10 really are dining, transit, tourism, events, hotels, nightlife, traffic cameras, shopping, coffee, Wi-Fi, as you can imagine. Yeah, so when we say MyCityWay, right, it was not just by accident that we came up with this name. My really means that me owning that city and that platform my way, right? So so you probably have heard Steve Jobs saying this, but the app, the device really becomes the app. So when you run MyCityWay on your application, that really becomes your tourist guide, your best friend that holds your hand and shows you the city around you in a location-based manner, right? We obviously convert data into information. We bring all these data sets and we make sense of it and provide information to our users. We have this always-on piece, which is when you there are two ways of providing information to the user, right? One is always on, which is push information, that you're pushing the information live to the user as you want. For example, if I take the 7 train every day between 5 to 7 p.m. Monday through Friday, can I configure that? If I configure that, can this app tell me if the train is running late, so on and so forth? If I'm a U2 fan, then in my event section, can I configure and say, whenever there's a U2 concert, can you push this information to me? So that's the always-on piece, the push piece, and then we have this whole spectrum of city guide, which I can actually give you a snapshot of the new version. Yeah, so this is the city guide version. So right from eat and drink to travel, whatever, to nightlife, what's on, everything that you can imagine that a city can offer is this in this pull model, that a user, whenever has the need or is in the vicinity, goes and pulls information from a need-to-need basis. A slight snapshot of what the always-on piece, which we call a snapshot or a dashboard, is this. So you have the news section on top, which is the hyper-local news of your city, the weather, the live traffic cameras. You can say, I always cross the Holland Tunnel, or whatever, every day, or that's my closest camera that I want to see, right? So you can configure that, and it'll always keep that on for you, and you can see the traffic on a daily basis. Gas prices. All of us are always concerned about gas, right? So live prices of what the offering is today. Events, and what does the Empire State Building color mean today? From that to the event, from that to even city-specific events. Of what does April 20, whatever the date is today, 18 or whatever. What does the city have to offer on April 18th, right? Really hyper-local events as well. So you have many such channels that you can subscribe to, and you can configure or tell MyCityWay what are the specifics around it, and we push information to you. So yeah, is this really do I have time?
Let's go
Yeah,
to
I
the
think.
panel.
Okay, we'll go to the panel?
Yeah.
Okay,
I
I'll
think
just...
that way we can do more on the Q&A. But
yeah, we
just
should...
in terms of experience or growth chat, yeah, I think, yeah.
Yeah, let's do
anyway.
that. We'll talk more, but I just wanted to finish with saying that there's a whole technology architecture behind what we do, right? So we have this very low level of bringing all this information together, putting a relevance engine on top of it, and then really creating that sophisticated MyCityWay API on top of it, and then they have the always-on piece listening to it, and the push and the pull on-demand piece listening to it, providing information, right? So to the user, it's all about simplicity, and that's what we bring to the user, a user guide that holds your hand, shows you the city around in a location-based manner, and behind this is such a strong technology architecture that we built. But we'll talk more in the panel, but
Okay,
I'll
thanks.
conclude with that. Yeah.
You guys wanna? I was keeping one seat warm.
I appreciate that.
Do you wanna? We'll start with the panel in terms of Q&A.
So we got kind of 3 very different perspectives: boutique, kind of big data, complex, smartphone, and then kind of schools and taking them to the next level. In terms of specific challenges, one thing I'm always curious about is a lot of product management organizations become feature organizations versus kind of what does the user want versus what can I build. So just a rough idea in terms of your product management team, if you're assigning time or talking to product managers, or in your experience, what percentage of time and what kind of activity should be spent kind of customer facing versus kind of delivery facing? Any of you, if you want to start and go this way, or what do you think the split should be and why, if you will?
Well, I mean, I'll start by just saying, as a small company that's always been very, very close to the client, our history has always been spend all your time talking to the clients, find out exactly what they want, and then just build everything they say. And that works when you're a very small client, we're a very small company, and you only have a few clients, and you can sort of super serve them. At a certain point, that stops working. I think that's where what we've realized over the last several years is that there does have to be a balance between being close to the users, getting information from them, but then taking a step back and spending a part of your time sort of analyzing that, digesting that, and then making decisions about what can you actually do.
So I'd say in our situation, so I would say part of that decision is driven by the nature of the customer markets that you're serving. If you're serving a consumer market, you have a little bit more leverage to do the develop features for the market. In our case, we serve the education market, and a lot of our customers are very large and have a lot of buying power. So we've become somewhat beholden to a customer that is providing us 10% of our revenue. So when they ask for a feature, then we have to. So in our market, I think we have to spend a little bit more time answering customer-specific requests, and so I would say it's in the neighborhood of 20 to 30%, and we're always trying to keep that down and do that as little as possible and do more stuff that's for the market as a whole, but that's always a struggle for us. Yeah.
I think we're the same boat as Michael, because we are a consumer-facing company, and we face that all the time as well.
Sounds great. So kind of 20 to 30% and kind of balance it out. So that leaves kind of 60 to 70%. There's always a challenge, right, which is product development teams are busy running full speed. You've got, let's say, a very focused product management team that's doing a lot of outbound. What kind of gaps do you see between product development and product management come up in terms of points of friction? How do you address those points of friction? Any anecdotes or guidance in terms of what everyone can kind of learn from our cuts and bruises in the past?
So yeah, from a product management and product development perspective, I think that one thing has to be clear, that the product management team, say the product manager to begin with, right, is the advocate of the user. So if that's understood by the product development team, life becomes easier, where both these teams work in conjunction of looking at the same user goals, the same goals from a user's perspective. So I think that if your product management team is communicating really well with your product development team, that really helps, because using the right tools, right? So for instance, in MyCityWay, we do use Basecamp and Jira and whatnot, all these good tools to keep that communication very clear, and the focus really is, again, from a user's perspective, or of what is the value that we bring to the users. And if both the teams understand that, I think there's a great teamwork.
So similar with us, and I think our industry, our space is different because it requires a really deep domain experience to develop the product. Unlike, say, at like a Facebook, where everybody understands like the idea of uploading a picture, and anybody has a sense for what that is and what makes it good or not good. In our space, developing educational assessments and tools that help teachers requires much more domain expertise. So there's a lot more knowledge and insight that needs to be transferred from the product management side to the engineering side, and what we've had a problem doing is finding out a way to balance. We've continually tweaked this, and still haven't gotten it right. But how do you balance? How do you create a role that enables somebody to have a foot in both those doors, so they spend enough time with the engineering group that they can be there day to day to answer questions and like you said, share the insight and educate the development team. But at the same time, this person, because it requires so much deep domain experience to make those decisions and to inform the engineering team, they really have to spend a lot of time out in the field and doing a lot of stuff on the business side and the customer side to gain that knowledge. So it's been hard for us to find, to create that product owner or associate product manager role that has appropriate balance between activities to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think in our case, as a B2B organization, not similar in the sense, there's a domain experience required in terms of delivering, our presentation software to the bigger businesses. In our case, as a small company, there's a real risk, and we've faced this before, where the people who deal, the service side, or the salespeople who deal with the clients on an ongoing basis, know so intimately our clients and what they need that sometimes it's hard in communicating with the development team to fully explain exactly what a feature should be or what it does. If for example, on the business side, it all makes sense. I mean, it seems like, well, everybody knows what this is supposed to do. And then being able to translate that to the development team in a way that is clear and specific is something that I think takes a lot more work than maybe initially people realize when when you start it.
Sounds great. So I think there's kind of two themes that came up in the first two questions. If I may, let me know if you agree or disagree. But it sounds like kind of role number one is be the advocate of the user, outward facing in terms of understand the ecosystem. But then developers need a lot of guidance in terms of specifics. So what I've seen end up happening is a lot of expertise, a lot of demand for time. So documentation kind of falls through the cracks, which is product descriptions or MRDs or whatever you want to call them. How do you address that in terms of, do you use any templates, or in your kind of organization, what's a good product description or a marketing requirements description in terms of either size of the document or how much time spent? How do you kind of document your product plans and product descriptions, if you will?
So we're an agile methodology shop, or fairly close to it. So we use a lot of screen designs, and we use design specs, which to document, and stories, of course, to share requirements. I think properly and communicating requirements, both from a written and a verbal, to development teams has always been and will always be a challenge. But I think we do it fairly well, and surprisingly, we don't have a lot of strict templates that we use, and still the design specs tend to come out fairly good. And not having captured something well in requirements doesn't tend to usually be where we fall down, so it's worked for us.
Okay.
I mean, I think that's one of the things that we've really struggled with as a small company, building out a development team. We spend a lot of time bringing in talent, getting expertise, coming up with the list of features, and the actual writing down of the specs and the building that out has actually been the thing that kind of has come the latest. And so we use Google Docs.
Yeah.
We use a lot of collaborative documents and sort of write it as we go. Interestingly, from our point of view, we for a long time thought we didn't really need to document things all that carefully because we had a legacy piece of software that we were building off of, and we all just thought, well, we'll just look at the old software and build something that does the same thing the old one does, and it turns out that that actually doesn't work all that well. And really, so a lot of it comes from just over time iterating, continuing to go back and edit and revise the documents, but using just collaborative tools, and having it based on the look and visual elements of the software is where we've focused most of our efforts.
I think I agree with Paul and Michael. We do everything that they said because we are agile too. We can't survive without agile, right? But we rely a lot on wireframes, right? Interactive design. We rely a lot on that because our visual aspect is really it's consumer facing, right? Has to be really beautiful and well designed and really thought through. So that communication with the wireframes becomes really, really easy between the product management and the development team because it's so clear, the vision is clear, everything is clear in the wireframes. And we use a lot of Google Docs and whatnot. So yeah, I agree.
Sounds good. So kind of user focus, kind of documentation focus in terms of if it's consumer facing, make it very clear. If it's business facing, I've had situations where we've written requirements once for archive. So archive got built, but the documents couldn't be restored because restored wasn't in. So there's a lot of like communication gaps that come in between perhaps UI and functionality. That being said, product description is probably, and product delivery is a percentage of the product manager's time. How do you deal with like pricing? And we'll get into the other elements of product management, but kind of delivery ends up becoming almost overweighted, or is it overweighted in your organization in terms of the percentage of time that a product manager should be spending or would be spending?
I mean, I think in our case, actually, I think we're slightly underweighted in terms of the product manager being involved in that. I think in a small company, still sort of building out and ramping up the development, pricing has, really has fallen mostly on the sales side. And while that, in a lot of sense, makes a lot of sense, not having product management be involved in some of those pricing and marketing decisions early on, I think, makes it harder to change and grow as you go, because you end up sort of putting yourself into a box in terms of pricing. If you're pricing things that aren't tied into how the product is built, how the product is put together, you end up having pricing that it's sort of hard to grow out of, extricate yourself from, because you've priced it separately from how the product itself is built. And I think that's something that, as a small company growing into a bigger company, we've actually spent a lot of time trying to adjust that. And with having a small set of large clients, it's always hard to adjust pricing.
So I tend to think of the product management activities is broken down into the product development type activities that are face off with the development team, and then the market facing stuff, which is all the type things like market research, competitive analysis, pricing, et cetera, et cether. And the way we operate is that our lowest, the guys at the lowest level in the product management shop, the associate product managers, also have the title of, or the role of product owner, and they spend about 2/3 of their time sitting with the development team doing day-to-day development type activities, writing specs, answering questions, attending Scrum, and then about 1/3 of their time is spent doing the more business analysis type activities, pricing, market research, et cetera. And then above that level, you have people who are focused much more heavily on the business analysis type activities, and that's almost solely what they do. So I don't do much, very little spec writing, or I don't face off with the development teams that much at all. I mean, I spend my time almost exclusively looking at business type questions and doing business analysis.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of similarity here because it's really the agile way of working, right? But from our side, our applications are free.
That takes care of that.
So there's no time spent there, right? But there's the sales side, right, that addresses advertising, right? And there's a lot of mobile commerce that we do. So we allow people to buy tickets, all kinds of tickets, movie tickets, or even order food via Seamless and Grubhub and whatnot from the application, right? So there's that aspect, and then there's the advertising aspect. So I think sales is totally different from what we're saying here, right?
Yeah. And again, I think we'll take that offline, but that's one point of friction where I see kind of product management as owning the ecosystem in terms of user down to pricing. It might be divided in the organization where, let's say, an associate PM is more delivery focused, director PM owns the whole thing, because at some point what you might find, and I'm just thinking aloud here, is you'll be building things, sales will be monetizing things, and often the twain shall meet, but there might be a chasm there, so just to kind of watch out.
There is.
Yeah.
And we've seen that in the past 2 years, right? There's always is, but you have to kind of listen to the market change as well.
Sure.
The market is changing rapidly. There's so many things happening, especially in the mobile world. And this is, everybody knows this is the year for mobile, right? So it's changing every day. So the goal is to just listen and to kind of adhere and to kind of keep going with the market change. And we see a lot of friction, we see a lot of things, but we have to adjust.
Absolutely. And again, food for thought might be, again, I've seen situations, and correct me if I'm wrong in the audience or panel anywhere, product management can be delivery focused, but then if you've got offerings on the sales and the advertising sides, there might be solutions, so not like product per se,
yes,
but still packaged and priced with descriptions and so on and so forth. So just some kind of food for thought there. Going to open it up to the audience later again, but since we are kind of on the topic, any kind of burning questions or comments? Otherwise, I'll kind of keep asking questions.
Yeah, I would like to know what is the structure within the company. Like, do you have multiple product managers? Do you have project managers? And how do you work with them? And what have you learned? Like, maybe you started with something and maybe you want to get to somewhere where you're not. So what do you think is the ideal structure?
Well, I can start. So that's a very good question. In our organization, earlier on, before MyCityWay Now we started building MyCityWay Now, which is the product that we're launching on Friday, which is a very interesting product, by the way. Before that, everybody kind of wore everybody's hats, right? So it was just kind of a chaos. I wouldn't call it chaos, but it was kind of, we have to really look out for each other and do things. But then, with that challenge, we saw there was a lot of confusion of who's really owning which piece and what's happening, right? So we thought we'll put some structure to this, especially for this product. So we picked a product manager who's responsible from inception to delivery, is responsible for the entire product, right? And then we have an interactive designer, right, who does all these wireframes and whatnot. Then we have a few graphic designers, and then we have our development team. So this is really, and then obviously if your product manager is not a tech guy, then you would need probably a tech lead or a project manager, if you will, right? So this is what you would need to really deliver one single product from start to finish to the market. And to add to that, I would call this a dream team. If you can get this working for one product, I would really call this a dream team, because often people confuse the role of an interactive designer with a graphic designer. And it's great. If the person can do both, that's great. But if you can separate it out, then those roles are really confined to what the delivery is. But one thing too, while we did that, we made sure that the ideas or the creativity doesn't stop, right? Because if all these roles are well defined, the creativity and the ideas still need to flow. So we took all ideas from all the place, but we made this product manager the filter. We call it the filter, right? Who takes all this input and then filters out what we need, right? Or the editor, per se, and then puts all the product requirements together.
So like a key question for me is, who does the product manager report to?
The product manager reports to me.
So we're in our...
The CEO of the company,
okay,
or the founder of the company, if you will.
So in your company, the product manager is more focused on the engineering aspect?
No. So that's the thing. There's product definition, and then there's the engineering. Engineering is development, right?
What I mean is like engineering versus marketing and...
See, product management and product marketing are two different things, right? So this is, we're just talking, the topic is product management right now. So product management is everything that I just mentioned comprises of product management. And then you have the product marketing team, because the product marketing team understands the consumer, right? And then takes this product to the market.
That's very interesting, because a lot of people, depending on what company you are
yeah,
in, you know,
it varies by some organizations.
It
product
does,
management and marketing
right,
is
it does, but
yeah.
It does, but I'm just saying that depends on the size of the company as well. If you can not afford or whatever it is, but I would say that these are totally two different functions.
How about any context in terms of organization structure, where it's, let's say, 600 people versus...
I
50
asked,
people?
so I asked Sonpreet her question, because when I look for product management jobs, the key thing that I look for is I want a role where I think of as the true product manager role, where the product manager is a mini business owner and is responsible for the product from inception to thinking about pricing, and marketing and all of the different aspects of owning and managing a product, and not just writing specifications for a dev team. And so one thing that's key for me is, where does product management report up to? If it reports up to the engineering team, that to me is not a good sign, because from my perspective, the engineering team is a service a delivery organization to the product manager, and he needs to be able to hold them accountable for delivering his product, and that's the way that our group is operated. I report up to my general manager, and so does the CTO of the technology shop, and they are my they deliver my product for me, and I can hold their feet to the fire if I need be. Whereas if I reported up to the VP of technology, then I couldn't really hold my manager to the fire. So that's a key distinction for me.
And you have product managers working for you?
Yeah, so we have, so there's three executive directors at my level, and we report up to the general manager, and we are many business owners. We have P&L responsibility for our product. I mean, all decisions about my product would come through me, from how is the salespeople going to sell it, where are we going to sell it, who are we going to sell it to, what pricing we do. And that to me is key, because I wanted I used to be in the engineering side, and I didn't just want to do requirements analysis and screen designs. I wanted to have that exposure to the business side. So that to me is what I wanted, like that full product management experience.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to add one thing, that so the product manager role doesn't end with from inception to delivery, right? It's also taking that user feedback and rolling it in, and then creating a new product or an update, if you will. So it's kind of that cycle, but I think from Michael, what differs is the pricing point. Is that what you just said, that you have people rolling up to you who
I think, his is more P&L, right?
Right.
He likes to own the P&L, which includes delivery and marketing, and then corporate communications, corporate marketing is separate, which I've seen is more of a mid-market kind of phenomena. At the startup stage, I mean, everyone's wearing multiple hats.
And I think my experience, when I look at, because I would love to get involved in the startup, right, and it's going to happen one day. When I look at it, it would be hard to come in as a, just looking at some companies, it's often the case that the CEO is still very involved with the product, because the firm is not big enough for you to have many other things to take care of. So you're still very involved in making decisions about the high level strategy, roadmap, the strategy for the product, pricing, etc. Whereas once the company grows to such a large degree that there are many other things to take care of, you've got to delegate more of that responsibility down to a product ownership functionality. So yeah, so I think that's one difference that I've seen in a lot of the startups that I've looked at versus mid-market.
It's very
companies.
true, because for a startup, the product is the bread and butter. So yeah, you as a CEO or a founder of the company, you have to be wearing that hat all the time.
And I mean, in a smaller company where we're actually we're in the process of building out basically a product management functionality sort of from scratch. One of the things that we've seen over the last few years is the importance of having that product manager be involved from the beginning all the way through to the end to delivery, because we find it very, very easy to build a great product or build a great feature, and then especially in a small company when you don't have a whole marketing department ready to go, it's very hard to, it's very easy rather to just let it be done. And there's just as much work getting user acceptance, getting user feedback, and really selling it through to somebody who's actually going to use it. And while marketing certainly does that, and sales does that, and you have blogs and emails and that sort of stuff, you need a product manager who's going to actually get out there and explain it and have materials that explain it and educate and really get people to use it, especially in the case of a product, especially in a B2B world.
And in a product management world, right, not marketing, just the management world, I think that the two people who really need to know their users and the market are the product manager and the interactive designer, or the user experience guy, if you will.
Yep.
Great.
Yeah, definitely.
Please go ahead.
I have a two-part question. The first is, how do you decide who to get feedback from when you have a product that's purchased by, let's say, in your case, Michael, the school district, but actually used by the teachers? And the second part is, how do you decide what feedback to actually incorporate into the product without fragmenting the product or making your current customers unhappy for not doing it?
It's really
Yes, that's actually like one of the big struggles we have, because our product is purchased by large organizations. It's typically purchased by committee. We don't even know who's all involved in that. They'll all score the proposal that we put forward there, and each one of them is scoring it from their particular perspective. A technology guy has his perspective, and then, like you said, the primary users aren't even the people who are involved in that committee. They're the people out in the field. So it's difficult for us. We have to spend a lot of extra time trying to understand each one of those end users and making each one of them happy with the product. So you're sometimes building a feature that the end user's not going to use, but the guy who's scoring the proposal on there is going to look for it. So you got to have it in there. So you end up doing some things like that don't make you feel good, but you have to do. And then when we talk about prioritization, I wish I had a really nifty and slick prioritization framework that I could talk about, but sometimes it often boils down to putting the people in the room who understand the customer best and just kind of pulling in all the different information you have from the conversations you've had with customers and usage data, et cetera, and making the best informed judgment that you can. I don't know.
I mean, I think in a B2B world, we have the exact same thing. I mean, we have large organizations that buy the software, but it's the salespeople at the end of the day who are using it. And so there's the exact same thing where the head of marketing or the head of sales wants it to work one way, but we know that no salesperson is ever going to actually use that when they're going out and trying to sell something. And that's really one of the things that we're sort of tasking our product manager to do, is to be that editor. Because up until that point, when we've done it collaboratively, where we had sales and client services and marketing all come together, and everybody sort of says, well, this is what people are saying I want, and this is what people are saying I want, and this is what people are calling the help desk about. And we've all just we used to just kind of fight it out. And sales almost always won, because they're sales, and they're the ones that are actually bringing in the money. So, and sales meant it's the big user, it's the committee in your case, or the head of marketing in my case, that makes the decision, and then you sort of have to kind of squeeze in the features that make the users happy, sort of in between, if you can, but you have to kind of go where the money is.
Absolutely. I think on the consumer side, just a quick comment, and then to your question, there's a lot of data on kind of what's working, what's not working, usability. Business to business, whether it's monetization down the road for your solutions, schools, or media agencies, having a core group of users who are not insiders, who are long-time users of your product. So having a 10, 20, 30 customer user group, once a quarter do a webcast, run your roadmaps by them, really helps establish kind of credibility with the decision team when they're in the room together. So if at this stage, kind of early to mid, you can get a user group of people together, whether it's consumers or businesses, that often helps kind of prioritize and justify the prioritization. I mean, yeah.
I appreciate what you said about the interactive designer and the product manager being familiar with the user, because I'm a user experience designer myself. So the question I have for you is, what happens when the product manager and the user experience designer disagree about how they both process feedback or user research?
Oh, this is the first time I hear that. Happens all the time.
Yeah.
And that's a good sign. That's a good sign, because now you have two really smart people bringing their own perspectives, right? Well, then you just sit down as a team, and it's not just you and your product manager, but now you sit down with the entire team and get some more feedback from the entire team that's working, who's really heads down looking at the product on a daily basis. I just think that at the end of the day, you have to come to some consensus. You don't have a choice, and move on, right? So at that point, if you feel something, just voice what you feel. If you feel something very strongly, just voice it out. And what I do basically, and I see that all the time with these two guys, right? And they're great, they're awesome, I love them. Coming in, voicing their opinions, and then we just sit down together, we just make a logical decision, and sometimes we bring outsiders, right, to make the decision for us. If it's really, if both the things make sense to me and we really have to choose one, then we have this our hyper users come in and kind of help us make the decision. So it's not new, happens all the time. I can't emphasize enough, but that's a good question.
Yeah, and I think the good news is at least people are talking and collaborating, and it might come off as fighting, but I guess they're communicating.
But if you're bringing up your opinions and ideas, that's a really, your company's really lucky to have you. I just want to say that.
Any comments on kind of the prioritization or how you go through the process?
No, I mean, I think that's absolutely true. And I think when you know, design and products don't necessarily see eye to eye, we've always found that trying to get it in front of an actual user makes the best sense. And then if that doesn't work, we still can't decide, we usually try to pick the thing that's the easiest to build. And then build that first.
Yeah. That's the business person's choice.
That's a really good point, because what happens is, that's a really good point, because what happens is, we've seen this happening, we just build a prototype, right, and throw it out. And if it's as Paul said, if it's a really small development piece or a really prototype thing that we have to do, we just roll it out and we do a real test in the market, which is the best way to check it out. You know, there was, I was reading this interview from, do we have time?
Yeah, I think so. Once the audience starts leaving, we don't have time.
They won't leave. So from from the startup world, right? TripAdvisor, everybody uses it, knows it. So there was this interview with the founder, and he's a smart guy. He says, I just put out a feature, right, on my product. I just threw a feature on there, and it's often either a 404 error or coming up soon, and I just sense if that feature is going to really work with my thought process, right? He throws it out. It comes up as an error or whatever, and then he sees the response, and then he goes builds. So there are a lot of little things that you can do to gauge the user as well.
Yeah, let me mix it up with, yeah.
I have a question about another struggle. It's tangentially, I think, related to the struggle between who you're answering to, which is, I think, definitely, it seems like the B2B platform, but also the B2C, have sort of a dichotomy in terms of many customers, but then a single platform that you want, that is kind of like your core product, that's the base from which you build off of, probably like cities in your case, maybe. How do you try to resolve that struggle between, I know I'm building something that's going to be good for many customers, but then one customer comes along and they pay a lot of money and they have a big idea that you completely change you try to change your direction. How do you sort of answer those questions?
I mean, the way we do that is we charge them. I mean, if somebody wants it badly enough, we'll build it, but they have to pay for it.
Yeah.
And usually sometimes we build it, and sometimes we convince them that what we're building is actually going to work for them just as well. But yeah, it happens all the time, especially in the B2B world, where you have one big company that's 10% of your revenue, and they want it. We'll either, and if they're willing to pay for it, we'll build it. But it ends up being, in that case, it ends up being a business decision that we try not to let impact the product as a whole. And a lot of times if one company asks for something, more often than not, a version of it will be useful for everybody, and they all get it for free.
And just from a kind of, quick P&L perspective, if you know historically, 20 to 30% of your effort is going to be deal-driven, if you will. You can kind of keep 20 to 30% of professional services and R&D on bench for every release, because you know it's a B2B product or there's going to be changes and deal-driven pressure, and keep it at that, which is that way the sales VP knows he or she has a little leeway and they're happy, the customer is happy, and you already have R&D and professional services kind of bench strength to deliver to those needs, which are kind of deal-driven, if you will.
I was just going to answer that question from a B2C perspective, right? Everybody's heard of YouTube? Okay. What YouTube was earlier, it was a site where they would want people to pitch, why are they dateable? Why should you be dated, right? So that was the whole idea. That was the concept. And they took this idea and they did a user survey or a user testing, if you will. And they went out and somebody says, I'm not going to put a video to say if I'm dateable or not. But yeah, I have this cute little kid of mine. Can I share that video? And see how the product just changed. And from that being that pitchable video sharing website, it became YouTube. So it also depends on listening to your users, the market, and all of that good stuff. So the product can totally change from one to another. And I have many stories like these, but I've seen that happening all the time.
That's great. It's going to go back for, please go ahead.
I'm really surprised that nobody's mentioned the impact of offshoring, because now I don't have any physical development teams here. And so I find that you had better have really good specifications, because if you leave any room for interpretations, things like cultural differences, miscommunications, all of those things. So specs have become elevated in priority because you're talking about how things might fall by the wayside. Specs now become like
Sure.
it's not only the product specification, it becomes the spec from the doc, it becomes the spec from the QA.
Yeah.
It becomes
absolutely.
like-
So kind of
yeah.
managing the process in an offshore environment across time zones, how do you
And
deal
so
with it?
It becomes contractual also, because
Yeah.
if there's something that's not built to spec, which is something that occurred recently,
Sure.
where something was delivered and it was like, what the hell is this?
Yeah.
You know, and there becomes a contractual dispute, and it's not spelled out perfectly in the specification,
Yeah.
then the other company can go, well, it wasn't perfectly spelled out, so,
Yeah.
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
Of course.
So specifications have now become absolutely critical and can be worth millions of dollars.
So I was
Yeah.
going to say earlier when we talked about how do you document and communicate requirements, that the fact that we have associate product managers who are doing the product owner role and are sitting embedded with the engineering team was one reason why we have lower, fewer documentation hiccups, is because we have somebody there who's able to provide, it's 2/3 of their time is dedicated just to talking to the engineering side and verbally, communicating with them all the time. So that takes pressure off of getting, having ship tight documentation. So yeah, when you do the less human contact you have between the product management team and the engineering team, especially when they're, like you said, separated geographically and culturally, etc. Yeah, then the documentation requirements go through the roof. Yeah.
One other comment
Yeah.
is, no matter how you explain it to a developer, they will always have an idea of how much better they know how to do it.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's their baby.
So
Yeah.
that's always like, the customer says one thing, the dichotomy between the development and the customer balancing that.
Yeah.
So I'm going through a situation with that now where the customer is trying to go through a whole feature of Unicode and all this stuff, and the developer is just insisting that absolutely nothing needs to be done because it's absolutely perfect. So,
Yeah, I think managing the life cycle in terms of from specification to offshore delivery, I've got a lot of stories there, but please
Yeah,
go
I can
ahead.
talk on that forever. But see, the least common denominator from a product side is a feature, right? And on the technology side, it's a code snippet, a snippet of code, right? So how do you really kind of communicate that feature to that code snippet? So that's where the role of a product manager and a project manager comes in, who understands the technology and understands the product. So I think one way to overcome that is and you have these smart developers all the time who have some great ideas as well. So right, listening and letting the whole ideology flow in the company is one other important thing, right? But anyways, so obviously communicating the holistic picture of what the product is, who are the users, why we're building this, is the most important thing to do in the beginning of any product. And the product evolves. Right? For example, in MyCityWay, we have in-house in New York people from 9 different countries, just with this small team. And then we have our offshore team, which is in India, which understands totally different language. So managing that is all by communicating the right holistic picture and why, and the idea behind why we're bringing this to market and for whom and what's the value behind it, what's the ROI for this, right?
Mhm.
Starting from that right into using those tools that I just mentioned earlier in communicating in small chunks of what needs to be delivered, probably on a daily basis, weekly basis, whatever it has to be, yeah.
Great. So I think a lot of time we've kind of spent on build, price, kind of manage the process. I'm going to throw a curveball out there. Not everything has to be built. So build versus buy decisions, savvy kind of product management shops, if you will, or personnel or teams, often will figure out what the user needs, what's our core, what we should build versus buy. How do you manage those decisions, or has that come up in your past, or do you see it coming up in your future lives in terms of build versus buy being driven by product management?
So that's driven in a large part by, or there's been a lot of those decisions that have been driven by product management at my company. Sometimes the biz dev guys will also get involved or drive those decisions, but there have been ones that product management have driven. Yeah, and that's I think that's where the business analysis side of product management comes heavily into play, right? You need people who have that ability to do financial analysis, competitive analysis. Yeah.
On a smaller scale, the sort of build versus buy for us is very often do we build something or do we leverage an existing service? Do we leverage a cloud service that, so we don't have to build, online video encoding? Do we, leverage an existing service that does that? And that question always ends up both being a technology decision, a cost decision, but also a competitive decision, because there have been several cases where something's come up where there's a question of, if we, use an outside service, if we build in some external piece, what does that do competitively in terms of making our software and our product more competitive, less competitive, more proprietary, less proprietary? And as more and more, SaaS and cloud-based services become available that can be leveraged via APIs and that sort of thing, it becomes a question that you have to sort of answer almost with every new feature and every new piece. Is there an opportunity to leverage something else that somebody else has built? And what does that do to you competitively? And we've had success in both cases, and there certainly are some cloud services that we do leverage as part of our system that are transparent to the user. They don't know about it, and there's some that we've decided need to be integrated into the application for sort of competitive reasons. But that build versus buy isn't just, I think, a financial decision, but or corporate decision, but it's actually also
it's a product
integration service, integration decision.
I think for us, we have to weigh. From a buyer perspective, we look time to market, right, and then cost. So we weigh this whenever we think of buy, and then if a company wants to really have some intellectual property, then is when obviously you have to build.
So kind of core you have to build, and then buy kind of what's faster, better, cheaper, and then reliability as well in terms of can you trust the partner and kind of availability. Questions from the audience? I thought I saw some hands go up at the back somewhere.
I have a question.
Yeah, please.
I'm going to have to drop your ball that you threw out there, but I thought that was a great question. What I have a question is more about process. Do you have any tools or methodologies that you apply to actually evaluate how well you're able to get things out, products developed, and how well your team is working? Or just even from your own perspective, how do you gauge that on a let's say a feature by feature basis or whatever else you might have?
Yeah, I mean, that definitely sounds like something from a more mature product management shop. You'd have to be of a certain scale just to even have somebody who can dedicate time to doing that, right? I wouldn't imagine, I don't know if you guys do that. So we do have processes. I mean, at the highest level, you evaluate your outcomes based on the P&L of the product, right? I mean, that's ultimately what we're working towards. But on a per release level, we would have release reviews where we would go back and look at things from a process perspective and see what went wrong and what didn't go wrong.
Are there any quantitative tools?
Actually, let me make a quick comment. There's a couple of very popular and proven methodologies. One is pragmatic product management and product marketing. There's another resource, he's, I think, stepped out. There's another gentleman in the room who's kind of written a bunch of books and does a lot of kind of best practices. But pragmatic, I've seen, and there's no commercial kind of association, as a methodology that I've implemented personally in startup environments, mature environments. It's great at kind of breaking down activities so people can get up to speed and templates. So I kind of recommend pragmatic. Obviously, you have to customize it to your kind of situation and see if it works for you or not. But pragmatic's kind of got a lot of intellectual property behind it, and good trainers and so on and so forth as well.
You can also look at business model canvas. It's pretty lean in nature.
So we've talked kind of product delivery, build versus buy, pricing, positioning. We kind of got into the global delivery model, but talked about it. What we didn't talk about was selling in international markets. There's a lot of buying being done in emerging markets. So how do you deal with something that's now a very small percentage of your revenue, but potentially large? how does a product manager deal with international market requirements, localization, kind of getting your product into international markets? Any kind of context or insights?
We should speak first on that one. Yeah.
So again, market entry versus the global delivery. Yeah.
Yeah, so before entering a market, we obviously see what's the opportunity, right? What's the ROI, what's the opportunity? We look at how difficult is that market, because we, from our perspective, we have all these data sets that we work with, right? So we also look at what's available, what can we do next for the ROI, how much time should we spend to get this kind of ROI? So we do a whole analysis before entering the market. Now, from a localization perspective, when we do the market study, for example, Germany now, our partners, BMW, iVentures, or BMW, are in Germany. So that was a market that was a natural fit for us, right? So when we got into that market, we thought that German, we have to address the language, right? So it was a bit of a struggle in the beginning, but again, getting into that localization, using different tools, looking at all these data sets that are available and making sense of all of them in different languages can be challenging. But for us, whatever was a natural fit, we took it on the way, and then we looked at the markets where what we address can become very popular in the future by reading some reports or analysis or whatever it is, and then kind of strategically entering those markets one by one.
So for us, I mentioned we got just, we're recently acquired by News Corp, and one of their pushes for us is to drive more international business. So one benefit that's out of that is that they have a large international infrastructure that we can leverage, so we don't have to worry so much about the tax and legal and the accounting things for us, which takes a little bit of the overhead for us, and we're able to focus more just on an economic and product perspective. Is this market attractive for us? Would we you know, basically you can get, like you said, get a return on your investment. So it boils down to economics of it. And for us, one of the hurdles that we face is, and for the education space, there's a lot of things that are particular to our space that makes it even more expensive to take your product into a foreign country. We have to customize the content more than you would for maybe a consumer product. There's laws and regulations around things like student data. Like a lot of countries don't want student data hosted outside of the country, so we would have to replicate our data center in order to enter that country. So there's kind of things that are particular about our business that makes it a little bit more expensive. So we haven't done a deal yet, but we're looking very closely, and we'll likely sign a deal this year for these one or two opportunities.
As a small company, I mean, at B2B, I mean, we sort of follow our clients, and if our clients end up being international, we're happy to help them. And so for us, the challenge really is, from a product management point of view, is to try to look ahead mainly from an infrastructure point of view, to see where the potential pitfalls, where the potential delivery bottlenecks are going to happen. Western Union, a big client that we just started working with last year, decided that they have salespeople using iPads, on every continent, and they wanted, people to access these presentations around the world, and we said, sure. How hard can that be? But there's been a lot of, so we've had to go back and really look from a delivery point of view. So rather than like looking at the market and then deciding whether to enter it, we sort of just need to keep an eye out for when somebody does ask us to enter it. We want to try to be ready. So that's how we've been approaching it.
So it's pretty interesting. All three different approaches, but very pragmatic, if you will, which is follow the customer, follow the investor, or follow the anchor tenant, and then proactive as well.
Yeah, we'll just rephrase that and say not follow the investor, but we are the mobility services for BMW.
Yeah.
So it's a different relationship. So following that relationship as well, but also driving from a company perspective, driving and kind of feeding into them that this is the market that makes sense, and kind of working in conjunction. But it's not always following.
Absolutely. I think in kind of Michael's case, it was News Corp, kind of distribution, umbrella. So they kind of acquired. Kind of one, maybe two last questions from the audience. I know I want to kind of make sure everyone has time to kind of talk to the panelists and mix around. So we have time for one, maybe two questions? Yep, so last. Sure.
This might apply to everyone, but specifically for you. So you mentioned you are on all smartphones. and possibly a web application also. How do you manage these different platforms?
Good question. So as I said earlier, that the agile methodology really helps in running multiple projects in parallel, right? And assigning, maybe, it's not necessary that one product manager works on one product, right? So we see these as life cycles, different products, having the same, very, very flexible backend, right? So we build a technology which is really scalable and very flexible, and then we took the approach of bringing it to all these form factors. So I think that what helped us was building that solid technology behind it. That took time in the beginning, but then once we built it, now just delivering on different form factors is really.
Let's say if you want to add a new feature, do you add it to all? Do you add it to one?
We add it to this common technology of ours, because then it's a rollout to all of them. So this is the common backbone of the company.
Okay.
So we add it to this, and then it goes to all form factors.
Automatically does that?
Well, there are different things that you have
Okay.
to work with, but yeah, if it's a big feature, it goes to the backbone, and then if it's small features, it depends, because we do a lot of native work as well. So iOS is all native, so on and so forth. So it depends. And also we're working with Microsoft and Nokia, Samsung, all these companies. RIM has approached us, and we're working together with those teams as well in delivering. And sometimes the requirements are different, because RIM wants certain things on BlackBerry differently as how Microsoft wants it on their platform, and so on and so forth, to showcase, because they really want to showcase our applications on their platform. So you have to always adjust to all of that, but agile is the way to go.
Yeah, I think the key is kind of know the user, kind of discipline of kind of platform architecture, and then put a method to the madness. Otherwise, at some point, something's going to break. I think with that, just want to thank all of you for kind of spending this nice evening with us. I know it's gorgeous outside, so you probably tempted to spend it outside, but it's great to see so many product people in the room. Thanks to the panelists again, and Don and New York Tech for kind of hosting us. So with that, I think the refreshments are still open, and just thank everyone. Thank you.